Hello and welcome back to the Liminal Branch Library, the archive in the seams. I'm your archivist and librarian Mordio Crow, and tonight we're back to GM prep / Daggerheart-Style campaign frames. So, oh yes, hello Hambone and hello Keysore. Oh yeah, sure, no problem. Enjoy your lurk. Oh, and hello Sonic as well. Moving flags, wow, yep. If you were here last time I had a little hex map over there on the left side of the screen, as well as some character art that was relevant to that previous setting. And this time, I have a different map and a set of flags, flags to represent the fictional nations of this particular setting. Now, a quick recap. Oh yes. Great point there, Nova. I made those flags. I read about flag design and I put those together. So a little bit about Daggerheart real quick. It's a tabletop RPG released by Darrington Press / Critical Role, and the system's a lot of fun. It's definitely going to be on my pitch document, but I particularly like the way they write up their campaign settings. They did a good job because it makes me, the GM who perpetually loves inventing my own settings, go, oh, I could see myself running a few of these. But instead of doing that, I'm turning my own settings into that style of format. And so last time we took my first campaign setting, this time we're taking the one I'm running in my off-stream campaign, and we're wrapping that up in a Daggerheart-style campaign frame. Yeah, so this setting, we start with a lot more text than I did last time. I don't know if we'll need to, maybe I'll read some of it, but this setting is inspired by, I'll say, my own heritage. Your humble librarian here is of Cuban descent. However, that's not the entirety of my heritage, and also I have very little cultural connection to that heritage, aside from a few dishes, which I'm like 50-50 on which ones I really like and which ones I'm not a fan of. So this project was something that I undertook during the pandemic as a curiosity, I suppose. If I scroll down briefly, I did a lot of reading over the pandemic. That's you with Puerto Rico, Volo? Oh. Yeah, then you very likely know how I feel there. And same with Nova and Filipino food. Yeah, so in my case, I read a bunch of books ranging from the poetry and writings of Jose Marti, who this setting ended up being named after, with a little bit of an asterisk on it, to ones about the various faiths and cultures that all ended up getting pushed together in Cuba, and then some of the stuff that came out of them. So there is a lot of real-world religion and culture research that went into this, but I don't have any even secondhand knowledge. There's only like one or two stories that my grandparents tell, and that's about it. So essentially, the idea behind this one, which I'm not going to put in the pitch yet because the pitch is supposed to be, I think we'll sell the setting itself without the context, right? But the context is, I wanted to create a tabletop RPG setting inspired by Latin America, specifically Cuba, but also taking some other influences from the region. Put it in a fantasy-esque, make it fantasy-esque, right? Like, we have a lot of medieval fantasy settings. We have a lot of East Asian fantasy settings. I know there's a few other Latin America fantasy settings, but I wanted to do take my own approach, do my own spin on it as a part of this, researching myself. Yeah, you agree. Yeah. So, my goal was to do a bunch of research on the cultures and history and build something inspired by but not beholden to, right? I tried to pay my respects to the cultures and everything that really exists, but also my goal is to create a fantasy setting to play tabletop RPGs in, right? So not everything's a perfect one-to-one mapping. I try not to, blur things too much or get too close to being like literally the same. So this pitch, so bringing this to the pitch, right? What is the core of this setting? Why would you play it? What's interesting about it? So Isla Marta, much like real-world Cuba, was the subject of colonialism. There was, people enslaved, cultures, indigenous cultures repressed, different faiths that were forced to hide themselves, otherwise be rooted out, right? So Isla Marta, or this campaign setting, in Horas de Tormenta, or in Times of Storm, is based off of a post-independence island, right? Like one which has recently freed itself from colonialism, but has not yet decided what place it, what it is going to be. Because really, it's one thing to cast off the literal colonialist governments, but it's an entirely different thing to, after having done that, decide your own future, right? Like there's going to be, especially after centuries of occupation, there's impacts of those occupying times, right? And so to facilitate this and to really focus in our setting, right? Because I wanted this setting to be something about the island, and about all of these things mixing together, but not about complex geopolitics, right? Because there would be a lot of historical stuff with the nation that conquered it, the neighbors, etc. We have made ourselves a closed circle. And so, mixed heritages. And now, maybe I'll get into this a little bit later when we get down to the different backgrounds and things. I have a few... This one I feel like I try to tread a lot lighter than my other settings where everything's more fantasy-based, right? And so we're basing things on creatures and ancestries that don't literally exist. But here, having ancestries or heritages that are based on real-world ones, I try to take that, do that responsibly, right? Yeah, so here, the pitch is after 20 years fighting for independence, Isla Marta finally won it, along with, finally won it. However, their victory was aided and shadowed by the return of the Sea of Storms, an ever-present storm wall that now surrounds them and has since their victory. In the 60 years since, nations have risen across the island, each with their own vision for what the free Isla Marta should become. However, these ideals often lead to clashes as Isla Marta and its people decide who they want to be or risk the Sea of Storms falling and someone else coming in from outside and deciding for them once again. Right? So, if we go to our touchstones here, I think one of the big ones for this one is Fire Emblem 3 Houses, in that my goal is to have a bunch of places that each have their own problems, but there's some potential there, right? Give the players a chance to really get invested in either one of the nations or coming up with their own, right? So that's where I think Three Houses comes in, where we of course have Tales of series influence, Final Fantasy series influence, but actually in front of those two, I'm also going to put. Actually, maybe I'll put it. Should I put it at number 1? I might put it at number 1. I might put Disco Elysium as our number 1 touchstone here, because though Disco Elysium is not a fantasy setting, it informs a lot of the vibes and feel that I'm going for like the average person. In that there was a great conflict, people tried to make things better, but for one reason or another, things aren't as good as they were promised, right? So, as for our themes, as you might suspect, with everything I've said so far, we've got... I never thought about that part about Disco Elysium. Which part specifically? I'm gonna bold, underline, and italicize politics. Like I said in the last one, that always comes up in my campaigns. There's always either nations at war or ideological clashes. Here, that is very much at the forefront. We're going to put discovery. We're going to put... let's see, we'll put cultural resurgence. Rediscovery, right? So for the past 60 years or so of this setting, a lot of the faiths and cultures are finally allowed to breathe and be out in the open for the first time. Oh, you never thought about that part of Disco? Oh, mostly think of the special skills. I see. Yeah, Nova referring to some of the mechanics. When I run this non-streamed, the mechanics are entirely homebrew. Though there's... I think I mentioned it last time. There's a good bit that does share some DNA with Daggerheart. Both systems do have a card-based abilities with focus on like how much you can carry. One of the big differences between them is my system does have a much more expansive skill system, which, as Nova alludes to there, is inspired by Disco Elysium. I think overall my system leans a little bit more towards what they call like the traditional GM player structure, whereas Daggerheart leans a little bit more narrative. Something else I want to add to the pitch is that, let's see, how do I want to phrase this? I want to emphasize the magic and mystery as well. Let's see, adding to the danger of these conflicts. Let's mention some of the supernatural things that exist, because this is not just politics simulator, right? It's a fantasy setting. Danger of these conflicts are the beastly Yamoin and ghostly echoes, creatures born of the depths of the island's cave system that are emboldened during the rainy season to rampage across the island's surface. Emboldened during the rainy season to shuffle the island's surface. The enigmatic Isikamaka. Oh, hello, Amasha. Welcome. The fart reverb of arrival. See, do I name drop the cave? Maybe I don't name drop the caves here, right? Beastly Yamoin and ghostly echoes, creatures born in the depths of the island cave system that are emboldened during the rainy season to rampage across the islands. You're here to rip and run, you have some writing stuff to do. No worries. Enjoy your own writing. Or hopefully it's the fun kind of writing. But have fun. Thank you, we will. Let's see. Adding to the danger of these conflicts we show in... Threats. Let's see. We are reading a draft to some betas. Oh. Fun. Is that your special project you mentioned not too long ago? Or the visual novel project? What else do I want to see? Any who would try to deal with these supernatural threats more permanent. What's also no, this is the Eldritch Suspense audio drama. Ooh, fun. Good luck, Amasha, and also Mordio. Thanks, Hambo. Any who would try to deal with these supernatural threats must not only contend with the human ones, but with the great secrets buried below the island itself. Right? So we're bringing up some of the supernatural elements here. We have monsters, we have ghosts, we have a mysterious cave system that has buried secrets, right? So that's I think that's a good addition there. Actually, you know what else I have? Hold on, I think I have this in. I don't think this will pop up on stream, but let me see if it does. No, it did not. Okay, cool. I have a second window of this. I can actually just bring out my setting themes, right? All right. We've got. Close this one. Let me put this here. We have syncretism, right? Is that spelled right? Syncretism. It is. I think it is. Right? The idea of cultures and religions, schools of thought, blending together and making something new. Right? We have mixed heritage, right? Being born between two or more things, ancestry, cultures, etc., and the tensions of balancing that. We have community versus individualism, right? Like how much freedom is worth abandoning. I don't want to use the word abandoning, right? How much freedom is worth prioritizing yourself? Nope. How much should you prioritize yourself over others, right? And what is and what could be. This one is basically represented in the nations themselves. Alright, tone and feel. I think this setting does lend itself to a few different feels, right? You can have your relatively it's almost, we have almost, I'll put it italicized, right? Almost modern fantasy. We have like early 1900s technology, some magical equipment, some magic itself, right? So we got that kind of vibes going for it. It's very much a, let's see, I hesitate to use the word grounded, but we'll put the word grounded in there. Grounded players, and indeed most even the vast majority of NPCs are ultimately all human. There is a limit to the power ceiling, right? Like, this isn't a setting where you have level 20 wizards off in their tower dealing with planar threats while the low-level party deals with the goblins, right? Like, there are certainly more powerful people than other people, but But for the most part, the power scaling is really squished, right? We want the setting to feel... It is... I don't want to use the word dark. Like, dark but hopeful, right? Things aren't good, but they can be better. Human lover. Listen. 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 Anyway. Let's see, I'm not sure how to phrase it here. Things are difficult, but they can get better. Right? Despite the hardship involved. Alright. That probably covers our main theme. Right? It's funny because it's the opposite of Monster Fucker, positive. Human lover, negative. Oh, yeah. Actually, that's a good... Let's go into that since Nova brings it up, right? So, contrary to Daggerheart, Marta is a very human-based system. Or human-based setting, I should say. For the most part, player characters and sapient NPCs will all be humans, right? However, there are a few exceptions. Let me put up some of those exceptions. The first are the afflicted, right? The affliction is a disease that spreads from parent to child and is often lethal to children, or to infants, right? To infants. However, if the... No, I shouldn't... I use the word however a lot, you know, and just talking out loud reminds me of that. If the infant survives, they may experience a resurgence or a remission when they arrive at adulthood. If they survive this second... If they survive this second... the second flare-up of the disease, they find themselves altered physically in a wide variety of ways that differs heavily from person to person with little pattern. Most take on some kind of animalistic aspect, but this is not always the case. Most cultures view these survivors as blessed, and they are typically given positions of reverence. A few cultures, however, a few cultures do the opposite and view them as cursed and drive them from their settlements. So, I'll put GM note here. Essentially, if you want to be an animal person or something similar, this is where you do it. This is where you land. You can even choose the narrative, right, of if you want their difference to be part of their story or not, right? Like, if you want their distinction to be of them being different from the average person to be an integral part of their arc, you could have them be from a place where they're viewed as cursed, or from a place where the blessing and like the reverence is actually a burden on them. Or if you want them to not have that be a part of, if you want this, or you can choose to have that not be a part of the character, right? By having them be from somewhere where it is not as big of a deal, right? And I'm not going to go into it in this document specifically, but I think giving the players that flexibility will hopefully be fine to those people who like to play more monstrous characters. I also try to leave it open to be like, oh, if you want to play someone who's a little bit more like orcish, for example, it's not, orcs aren't strictly like animal-esque, right? So that's why it doesn't always take on animal aspect. I think in our campaign, we have one person who from the need, not a player, but we met one NPC who from the knees down just has like bird talons, if I recall correctly. I'm trying to think, did we have another afflicted? There might have been one or two other NPCs. I don't think any of them have been too prominent, right? Yeah, you think so. You can even choose the narrative if you want difference from the average person to play a role in their character arc. Alright, but I said there were a few exceptions. This is one. The other one, which I would put at even rarer, is there are... well, I'll just put spirits as the header. There are... I'm going to bold and italicize this. Some rare... There are maybe just rare. Rare... non-echo spirits who have a sapience similar to humanity, who could be fit to be a party member under the right circumstances. However, this is very much work with the GM territory, right? Let's see. I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but like there's the I don't want to call them changelings, but very similar to changelings that exist in the setting. So like you could be something like that. I guess I could theoretically see a player being a lone watcher. That gives them a very heavy lore burden. I'll put like there's a changeling-like creature for one example. Non-interventionist, or I guess observing spirits that may occasionally interfere, right? With human history. I was putting etc., right? So I list two examples. Technically speaking, that's on the table, but I think most people would fall under human, and those that don't may fall under afflicted, and then those who that really doesn't fit, maybe you could work to find something in the spirits realm. Now, actually, you know what? Before I put... For the most part, player characters and sapient NPCs will all be humans. I'm going to put... There's also... How do I phrase this? That there are altered humans. Humans. We have standard humans. We have tempered humans. They are what they are, right? Tempered humans. The eastern nation of Lakamun tempers all of its citizens with memories and magic derived from their predecessors. Oh, did I forget an S? Yes, I did. Right? while they are all still human, I'll put in rare cases, this can cause physical alterations, but in most, it primarily just changes their eyes in a dramatic fashion, right? So there's still, I think the step between humans and tempered humans is very small compared to the step between humans and afflicted, but maybe I should have them be as a separate header. You know what? Yeah, I guess I'll put that as a separate header, right? We'll keep this as all be humans. There is some variation of differing degrees of rarity, or what's the word I'm looking for? Location, or based on the character's place of origin. So, regular old humans, right? Alright, there we go. So we got tempered humans. And then we got... This one I hesitate to put in as an ancestry. I'm just going to put it as question mark, because I don't even think it's been named in our non-stream game, even though 2 of the party members have something like this. People who can hear things. Put that in quotes. Hear voices, right? Whether it's the voices of others speaking in unison. Wow, lol. Yeah, I mean, that's not really the best way to phrase it. I don't know. People who can hear voices. I don't know. How would you say it? Hear voices in the static. Right? Whereas voices of others speaking in unison to describe scenes that the person themselves has no way of knowing about, or their own voice speaking from the perspective of an object that has no business speaking. This ability has in recent years been occurring in more and more people, right? And that is a plot point in our non-stream campaign, but also I think it's an important setting thing, right? Like there's this almost like broadcast, right? Which certain people, almost like a broadcast of the island, of the world, of things that are happening in it that some people are just able to hear spoken to them, right? They generally do not have any physical changes, right? So there's a bunch of stuff here that we have under ancestries, and I think this is... Am I missing anything? I don't think I am. Alright. So let's go back up now to communities. Communities and Isla Marta. Actually, we're going to ground this first. We're going to ground this in... The campaign begins in La Alianza. The centermost and youngest nation on Isla Marta. Just over 5 years old since its inception. Here is where the ideas and peoples of all other nations, all of them, the ideals and peoples of all other nations intersect. If conflict is to bloom anew in Isla Marta, La Alianza, will be the spark that lights the fire, right? And the reason why this is important... Oh yeah, you know what? Hold on, let me just go into my OBS here for a second. And I'm gonna... We're gonna move scenes as I zoom in. Actually, before I zoom in, if you look down here on the map on the left, you can see all the different borders, right? And in the center, the one outlined in black, that is the one that I am talking about here, right? It's quite literally centrally located. All other nations, except for one, or except for two, like literally border it, right? And so it's here that it's a microcosm of the island as a whole, which makes it the ideal starting point for a campaign because it does allow people to be from anywhere, right? You don't have to worry about how someone from the eastern tip of the island is now in the depths of the western country or anything like that. It's also the area which has the least, what's the word I'm looking for? Least structured government and all that, right? As far as my like my own planning has gone. So there's a lot of flexibility innate with that central nation. So I'll make a note up here. We're focusing on these communities in La Alianza, but other nations will be mentioned when relevant. So the highborn, right? So our nobility, right? Isla Marta, in recent memory, 60 years ago, cast off the chains of nobility, right? Or rather, we should just say revolted against nobility, and thus there are no true nobles. Did you see me start to type however? Because I did, and I didn't say the word out loud. Despite this, there are prominent families from a variety of sources. The wealthy merchants who profited off of independence and their families, as well as the generals and famous soldiers whose renown I can spell whose renown earned them their own slice of the nation's governance, I guess we can say. Famous soldiers have formed their own dynasties of another name across the nation. If you are highborn, you're from one of these powerful families. If you are highborn, you are from a family with significant social status, either due to wealth and trade, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the leadership roles in a major faith, or history of heroism during the revolution. Which of these traits is your family known for? And in what ways do you embody that heritage? And in which do you resist it, right? Let's see, now Loreborn. Loreborn, I think, is a fun one in this setting, since we have yet to get widespread education, right? So if you are a Loreborn character, this does narrow you down on where you're from quite significantly. So, Universities are rare, and those that do exist either cater to the highborn or are new in the eastern nation of Lakamun, are newly made and still finding their footing in the eastern nation of Lakamun. So, to be a loreborn, to be able to study, you likely do have either some affluence or were noticed by someone for your potential who has taken you under their wing. So let's see, in La Alianza, where we're starting, Pueblo Profundo's governor is a self-proclaimed scholar and leads the only college in central Isla. If you can impress him or simply pay your way into his school, you can gain access to his city's knowledge. And while this is a very Nova-focused comment, that is exactly where Bunny's mother studied, is in this particular college. Lakamun to the east is unique among nations in that it has mandatory public education, resulting in high literacy of its citizens. If you are a deserter... What? Yeah, Bunny's mother with her formal medical knowledge. I believe it was mentioned in the campaign when you went there very early on that she went to school there. Yeah. In Pueblo Profundo, which is just the neighboring city. If you're a deserter from this nation, you've brought that education with you. Yeah, I guess I was just clarifying the Nova-centric part that you said. Oh yeah, I just meant that it was relevant to you, Nova, specifically, that's all. Let's see. I'm gonna fast forward to the next song and remove this one. That one's a little too ominous. Otherwise, if you have if you want to be knowledgeable about the faiths, each faith has a different city where it is most prominent for scholarship of that particular culture and stories, and its stories are most widely known / taught, right? And I'll just put like, I only need to list them off. You get the idea is that you're probably from one of those other specific cities, if that's the angle you want to take. If you want to be a loreborn of a particular culture, right? And so my questions here are: what is your knowledge? What is the specialty? What is your major? What sort of knowledge do you pride yourself on, and why do you and what do you travel to learn? Do you travel to learn, or how do you hope to apply it in your travels? Alright. So, let's see. Next up is Orderborn. Orderborn, I think, is... Orderborn's probably pretty tough here, right? Because this is such a land of change. I'm going to come back to this one. Ridgeborn Marta is home to... Marta is home to 3 stretches of mountains. Does every spot need to be filled, do you think? I don't think it does. But I do think it makes sense to at least try to fill them, right? Orderborn characters, I think there is a spot for them. And actually, you know what? Let me put to-do paladin cleric like in some of the faiths, right? Because something that we're not really talking about the individual faiths and nations, because if we did that, we wouldn't have time to fill out the form, I don't think. But a lot of the faiths of this setting are, by their nature, a bit flexible, right? A very much like a grassroots sort of thing, where each village or practitioner, like faith leader, has their own spin on things, which does not lend itself well to Orderborn. But there are 1 or 2 which have a bit more structure to them. So that's probably where we could get that Orderborn in there. 3 stretches of mountains. That line the main island. These places serve as borders between nations and as the homes and hiding spots of those who fled being conquered prior to independence. Right? So I think for this one, being Ridgeborn does mean being exposed to the dangers of the rainy season more than most people, as the cave systems of the mountains often hide Gamoline and echoes within. Right? Let me go back to Orderborn here and write its base flavor text. In this time of change, there are fewer what are they called? Communities. There are few communities that would qualify as Orderborn. Chief among them are the faiths of the Eastern nations, where a strong emphasis is placed on tradition and on unifying the diverse manifestations of their faith under what they believe to be the strongest tradition, right? So I think for this one, there are basically 3 options, and do I mention this here or down below? Depending, I'll just put the question here. What aspects of your faith give you strength? Which tenets make decisions difficult for you? Right? Let's see, for Ridgeborn. I wonder what good questions are for Ridgeborn. I don't have much for them at the moment. Seaborn, though. Let's go to Seaborn. There are 2 main seas sailed by... Well, not main. There are 2 seas sailed by the people of Isla, with narrow passages that skirt near the Sea of Storms. Separating them. In the north, Oceano Perdido is where the major trade routes are. frequented by are major. They're frequented by merchants and pirates both, as well as the navies of those northern nations as they try to curb piracy. Right? In the south, Oceano Morocco, I forget if it's a K or a C, is filled with hundreds, if not thousands, of keys, many of which are uninhabited, save for the Yamoin or echoes which lurk in their caverns. Many of these southern islands are said to be connected by a vast underwater cave system, leading to many myths about them. Right? So we have our two seas, one of which is a lot more, I don't want to say mundane, right? But it's a little bit more of a standard ocean, where you got trade, you got pirates, people go out there to fish, etc. And the southern one is where you get a little bit more of that unexplored and unknown elements. So a lot of things here, you'll hear me keep saying like, oh, as a player, you get to sort of pick which vibe you want, right? And our starting location, La Alianza, borders both of these oceans, so you really can just take your pick. Oh, what's that? What's that emote? Ahoy. Oh, ahoy. Yeah, so let's see. Oh, which... Yeah, it's a sailor. I see it now. It's a little small when I glanced over at it, but I get it. Reporting for duty. Which ocean are you more at home in? Which ocean are you more at home in? And what mysteries within it? Do you dream about, right? Slyborn communities and upbringings are common across Isla Marta, especially in its center. Each city of La Alianza has its own flavor of Slyborn community, most iconic to it, right? Pueblo Profundo has organized crime and what's the word I'm looking for? Like in a classical protection racket sort of deal for the miners and the establishments that serve them or cater to them. Agua Oscura has smuggling rings. Ciudad Victoria has it also has smuggling and also border crossing, right? People getting in or out of the various nations often make their way through Ciudad Victoria, whether they're fleeing somewhere, fleeing away from something, or wanting to end up somewhere. And then there's, oh yes, of course, Ciudad Libertad has gambling rings, legal and illegal. Or legal, we'll put legal and legal, right? So for this one, let's see. I'm not sure what my questions will be for that one. let's skip to Underborn. Underborn is fun because it touches on another aspect of the setting, which we'll get to. I think once we get past this, we'll start touching on some of the unique aspects of the setting before getting to classes in a little bit more detail. Underborn, when, let's see, 300 to 400 years ago, when Marta was conquered, some of the indigenous Kino people fled to the cave system of Marta, choosing to contend with the monsters that call it home rather than the conquering empire. While many died, some did carve out their own settlements deep underground where generations passed with people who had not seen the sun. In these days, those who wish to return to the surface have, and many have chosen to due to the danger of the world below, but some have decided to remain there, and some now work underground for most of their lives as companies seek to exploit the supernatural resources there. Pueblo Profundo, which quite literally means like deep home, right? Is one of these main cities, is home to many miners who would be who would be considered underborn due to the time spent in the caves and with their supernatural wonders. Many of Kino heritage can trace their lineage to an underground settlement of some kind. Right? Wanderborn. I think Wanderborn communities are rarer at land than they are at sea. In both seas, small flotillas may wander from key to key, fishing and occasionally farming for a couple years before moving on. On land, however, wandering is generally wandering lifestyle is generally reserved for couriers or miracle workers, divine magic users, as many people of Marta lack the funds or supplies to sustain a life of travel. A life of travel over land that is all claimed by others, right? So the key here being the island has long since had all of its land bought out, right? So you can't quite do the move and gather and live off the land on the island itself. Sounds relatable. Oh no! Yeah, it's look, if we scroll back up to the themes or the points up here, right? Things are difficult, but they can get better despite the hardship involved. I think that's a key thing I want to emphasize about this setting. It's like, yeah, it's things are rough here, but maybe they'll get better. Some say fiction is a reflection of the real world. Rip. Yep. And this is probably the most direct reflection that I've personally made. in this setting. I want to do some like non-TTRPG fiction writing, creative writing in this setting. But right now, streaming is how I spend my creative time. So that hasn't happened yet, but I'll likely get to it at one point or another. Running a tabletop RPG has given me a lot of ideas for how to go about doing so. Same. Yeah, it's hard to juggle multiple creative projects. All right, for Wildborn. Wildborn communities exist on the fringes or on the borders of nations, or on the borders of nations where tensions are high, or near the few supernatural landmarks that remain where humanity has yet to fully conquer them. People in these lands are largely self-sufficient, but do typically rely on trade with nearby cities for anything they cannot source themselves, including, potentially, protection during the rainy season, where Yamoin and echoes wander the land. For those Wildborn settlements too poor or few of population to have strong defenses, obscurity, we'll say luck, and going unnoticed by monsters is their only way to survive. Right? Alright. So we put a little blurb. We don't have questions for all of them, but we put little blurbs for everything. So let's go down past the power or the classes for now, because honestly, with the way things are different, right? Most of these classes could probably fall into different magic sources, depending on, what vibes the player wants to go for. So let's make our first distinction. Sources of power. We have miracles, right? Divine magic was, until recently, the only real form of magic aside from being born and afflicted. Depending on the faiths, miracles can be worked by people who align themselves with who are chosen by, right? Are chosen by specific demigods or blessed by saints. So there's, we have a good bit of divine magic present in the setting. However, even the most studious or influential of faith worker will not necessarily be able to work miracles, right? So miracles they're the old magic, right? They're the what the world's familiar with. Then there's tempered, the tempered. The godless nation of Lakamun to the east has invented its own type of magic by distilling the memories of its deceased citizens and implanting them into others. These powers are typically organized by career, I suppose? By career? EX, agricultural, communication, medical, soldiering, etc. Right? Most citizens of the commune can produce one or two, we'll say can produce a handful of minor magical effects and one or two major ones. We'll put in crafting up here as well. So the tempered are very much, for the most part, based around utility as their powers. Now, of course, there are exceptions for that soldiering field, but this is a very engineered form of magic. That's this is about a 40-year-old form of magic. Some collections of memories, for reasons unknown, are more unstable than others. Mining, sailing, and produce erratic effects. You also have a third type of magic. Our third type of magic is the Great Work. The capitalist nation of Fortuna, on the northwestern side of the main island, has recently begun its Great Work. Good old Great Work. Why not Best Work? The Great Work is actually named after a real... Is it a philosophical, sociological? Hold on. Let me take a quick look. How does Wikipedia... So, problematic wording. The Great Work is modeled off of the Great Man theory of history, which is that history can largely, you can largely understand and follow history, or like view it through the lens of great men and their impact on the world, right? It's a very individualist approach to history, and so I bring that into the Great Work here, which I think, in which magic is used to grant the power of the great men of history to those that invoke them, right? It's a very necromantic, but also like individualistic, right? Like it's like, oh, you're not just raising zombies, you are raising you're raising Santo del Bosque, right? Men's story versus her story. Yeah, yep. And to be clear, like in this setting, I don't generally, so, you know, tabletop RPGs can be a great place to explore different themes and indeed to fight against themes that are problematic and difficult to handle in the real world, right? Like in a tabletop RPG, you can just easily go and overthrow the fascist empire, right? Like that can be the whole point of the game. I tend to stay away from like having racism or sexism in my campaigns, even as like a force of evil. But I did incorporate some threads of it in here, specifically with the Great Work and with one of the faiths. Though I do put some spin on it compared to reality to hopefully separate it from reality a bit, to make it a bit different to engage with. This is really, the Great Work is supposed to be like me taking necromancy and being like, what if I made necromancy more problematic, right? Because a lot of the times in a fantasy setting, it's like, why is necromancy evil, right? Because the god of evil is associated with it. You can raise the dead and you can make a bunch of food, and I don't know, all that kind of stuff. This one really, by putting the focus onto these great people, that's where it sort of, you know, it gets very individualistic. A very individualistic magic with a necromantic flavor, granted only to those who its founders see as having potential and aligning with their own beliefs. And I think this last part also sort of works into it. Necromancy is especially evil IRL, or illegal at the very least. Yep. I mean, I suppose you would be the expert in skeletons being animated, right? But when Jesus does it, it's okay. You know, I'm going to put in parentheses here, it's like more of a ghostly necromancy than zombie, right? Bones rattled. Male privilege. Yeah. So I think this last line here also sort of drives in, and I want to contrast these two next to each other, right? And their different approaches. So like the last thing I'll really hit on for the great work, or at least last thing I'm intending to hit on, is that there's founders who understand how it works, and they give it only to those people who they view as having potential and who they view as aligning with their own beliefs, right? And creating this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. Stop hitting on the great work. Sorry. You're right, very problematic. And so it's a self-propagating philosophy of only the greatest of individuals matter, and therefore we will make the greatest of individuals even greater by giving them more power and influence. Meanwhile, the tempered does have its own problems, but like the nation has its own problems outside of the tempering process. The tempering process is a sharing of knowledge where everyone is sharing in the knowledge learned by prior generations to gain some magic. Right, so the power can trickle down, exactly. Yeah, you get it. If the leaders of the great work are great enough, then those who follow underneath them will be good enough, and those underneath will be okay enough. Yep. And so these two powers are magic effects, both of which are relatively recent. I forget the exact time scale. This is around 10 or so year old form of magic. Somewhere around there. These two are supposed to contrast and really come into conflict with one another in the setting, right? The magic of this generalized people, right? Here, and actually I'll even add that note here to help bring that emphasis to the forefront. Called collectives based on the field. EX the farmers collective, right? So the tempered really emphasizes the group, right? You get tempered and you are a part of the group. They take all of the memories from that group, they distill them, and if you're a part, and like, you know, it's spread throughout the group, so that way if one person learns something, the whole group can learn and use that thing. You know, the great work's all about the leader, the person. Let's see, so there's 1, 2, 3, and then the fourth form of magic is, we're just going to call it something is wrong. Similar to the question mark humans up above. Humans up above. Some of the people who can hear through the static can produce unpredictable effects. Many assume them to be cursed or heretics of some kind. Hive mind light. Yes, hive mind light would be hive mind light. This power is understood by no one and was very rare, but is becoming more common. Let's see, was there For a second, I thought I had a flash of there was one more. Oh, yes. Storm Cult. We'll talk about them right now. So let's see. El Mar de Tormentas. Or is it de Tormentas, right? The Sea of Storms. Alright, this distinction section would probably have a lot underneath it. Surrounding Isla Marta is the Sea of Storms, which has raged for 60 years since its independence. This mythical storm existed centuries ago, but was pierced by the Maria Empire which was pierced by the Maria Empire, which they used as justification for their conquest of the lands beyond, right? This storm makes travel to the outside world impossible. Ships cannot survive the crossing. People exposed to the storm water also have alterations made to them, both mental and physical. Their memories and minds are scattered, and they may take on a fish or an ocean life-like aspect. Is this like the storm on Jupiter? I suppose so, yes, in that way, right? Like, that storm just always going, always running. Yeah, I think the important distinction here is this is something that did exist for centuries, and it stopped for centuries, and for reasons unknown has started again, very conveniently timed for Isla Marta, in that it is now restarted in a way that is helping it maintain its independence, right? So the Storm Cult worships the storm. Yeah, planets lined up and all that jazz. Exactly. That could perhaps be one of the many mysteries that's hiding deep in the caverns beneath the islands. Storm Cult worships the storm. Seek to become altered by it and wield its powers. No one likes this. Asterix. By that I mean every nation and faith is strongly against this. Right? I'm sure you could make a Storm Cultist character work as a player character, but there's no way quite as much to be as universally reviled as to be a Storm Cultist. People generally don't like things that mess with their memories, right? Let's now talk about our threats. So we have our Sea of Storms surrounding us. What sort of creatures and dangers, other than humans? Wait till you see what Bunny's cooking up. Yeah, Bunny inventing... Oh boy, man-made horrors beyond my comprehension. Right? Threats. Yamuin are animals and rarely plants oversaturated with island blood. Are oversaturated with... I guess maybe I shouldn't call it. What do I call it? Yeah, I think blood of the island. Which gives them a ferocious hunger for humanity, or occasionally the things humanity has built. Look, wait, hold on a second. Nova's character in this non-stream campaign is called Bunny. Nova's like this, wait till you see what Bunny's cooking up. I say you're up to all sorts of stuff, and you say you're just using what I gave you. I'm sorry, am I the one who made Bunny take that man's eyes out? Am I the one who suggested Bunny remove the brain from another person? I don't think I was. I don't think I suggested either of those actions. No, that was another member of the party. Don't put this on me. Don't put it on me that your character is collecting body parts and then put mushrooms on them, which has caused them to congeal back into a person-like object. But you gave me a mushroom growing on a corpse. You know what? Yeah, that one's on me. That's the one contribution I had to this. I gave you mushrooms growing on corpses in a way that seemed to preserve the corpses, and you thought, what if I took all the body parts I've been collecting and add the glue mushrooms to it? What else are you supposed to do with it? Great question, I suppose. What was I thinking? What was I thinking? Anyway, we can't use mind flayers in this setting because those are copyright of Wizards of the Coast, but if we could, there's a non-zero chance that Nova's character is inventing the very first one. Yep, Amber, that's the right expression. That's the right expression to have. Boy. Let's see, so these monsters are incredibly dangerous to the average civilian, but thankfully predictable. Thankfully mostly predictable. Predictable. Most Yamoin lack higher order thinking. In fact, the higher order thinking needed to hunt or plan, so they merely seek out the nearest food source and pursue it until either they or their target are dead. Right? So, Yamoin, dangerous creatures. These are your monsters that just show up, cause trouble. You need to kill them. Most of them, relatively unintelligent, very, very much compelled to eat people, and so they will try to eat people even at the expense of their own safety. Hunter plan, actually I should put it here, or even have self-preservation. GM arguing with innocent PC. I'm sensing some bias in that clip title. I'm sensing just a little bit of bias in that clip title. The next type of threat we have are echoes. Echoes are ghosts of the dead, congealed together around a singular event or emotion. Typically, these are negative emotions, right? Ill. What? You don't like the word congealed? Like an ectoplasm rat king? You like it? Oh, good. Echoes tend to be more difficult to deal with as they can work in subtle or non-obvious ways, but they can be less lethal in that many times their victims are brought into the echo and may survive if rescued in a timely manner. Powerful echoes may warp the land around them into a collage of memory. So for example, if the echo is of many soldiers who died in battle, the area around the creature may be filled with spectral soldiers and be twisted to resemble battlefields across the island and across time periods that these soldiers fought in, right? Same thing could be said of fear or sadness or etc., right? So good news, if an echo arrives at your town and inflicts everyone with like a debilitating sadness, it might draw them into this terrible plane of its. But if the neighboring town finds out, they can get someone qualified to come help, and even though you've been trapped in the echo for days or weeks, they can fight it and get you out of it alive and intact, which is not the same thing you could say if a Yamoine strolled into town. So echo's trickier to deal with, but if you react fast, you can get away with less lethality. Third type of creature, we have Sin, which is not to be confused with Final Fantasy X Sin. That we call the Sea of Storms here. No, I'm kidding. Though the Sea of Storms does have some of that Sin DNA from Final Fantasy X, especially in that memory alteration property of it. But Sin are spores that fall from the dark half of the night sky, the darkened half of the night sky, which implant themselves in humanity and grow into insectoid creatures, warping the form of their host as their host relinquishes more and more agency to them. Ahaha! I missed what that was too, if that was towards the Final Fantasy X stuff or the description of these. I'll put in parentheses, essentially, this is where vampires and similar things come from. Oh, Titus laugh, .wave. Yep. Similar things come from. These are thankfully rare in the current age, though still not unheard of in the past. Bands of miracle workers called exorcists would seek out Sin and try to remove them from their hosts before the human afflicted was too far gone. Yeah, these ones are I'll put vampires. I put vampires. I'll also put like demon-like. Nova, did you post that clip as a Twitch story? Yes. Demon-featured humans, right? For the early time... Oh, and actually, you know what? This one, we did have an example of this in the non-stream tabletop RPG. I think only one. Now all of China will know Mordio was arguing with Nova. It was banter. It was banter. And so you've had very few with Bunny, yeah. Very few examples of this in the non-stream campaign, but one of them was one that I was personally inspired by flies. The person who was afflicted with the sin essentially had their flies go out to people who were very sickly or near death and sort of possess them, turn them into zombie-like possessions. Right, just like Miffy. Right, you're not responsible. You got it. We're not responsible for our own player characters. Yeah, okay, that's something we can say. Alright, so let's see. We've got our sources of power. We've got our Sea of Storms, very important thing. We've got our threats. You know, I'm going to move threats above Sea of Storms. In fact, maybe I'll move it above sources of power. I feel like this is very general, where some of these get a little bit more specific. Yeah, alright. I want to put another distinction here as Isi Kamaka. So, Isla Marta has an intricate cave system. Much of that system is mundane and has its own natural minerals and materials that are useful for humanity to harvest. At times below that, and at times rising to merge with but below that cave system, at times rising to merge with it, is Isi Kamaka, a world, a spiritual, a spirit world of sorts, where Yamoin and Echoes retreat to during the dry season. In many of the island's faiths, Isi Kamaka is a holy place, and on the other side, and crossing it, is a human's final trial, as the underworld / afterlife is on the other side, just below it. Right? So, basically, we have this land of monsters and spirits, and Yamoin and Echoes retreat there during the dry season. But theoretically, people can go there. Its landscape shifts with the seasons and creatures. Oh, I'm off the screen. And creatures within it, making it difficult to navigate and consistently exploit for the resources within, such as stone marrow, which we'll talk about in the next section, which would be highly valuable, which is highly sought after, and many seek to stabilize Isi Kamaka to better mine it. That's what we need. We need resources. We need cool materials. We have Anamoine and stone marrow. Plants infused with the same blood of the island that... plants infused with the same blood of the island that causes Yamoin to be enraged, instead in perfect harmony with the plant life. The fibers of these plants are woven by crafts people, typically those of a particular faith, to create magical clothes. That's right, most of your magical items are magical clothing, right, in this system, thanks to most magical stuff being from plants, right? So it creates magical cloth, magical clothing, and that, I think, is fun, right? Magic fashion. Fashion clothes, yep. Stone Marrow, meanwhile, fashion souls. So, fun fact, in this homebrew mechanic, like the mechanical homebrewed system for this, the inventory is very much themed around cards, right? The core mechanic of what your character's quote-unquote class is your ace, right? And the main bit of clothing you wear that tells you like what how your defenses are calculated, that's your suit, right? So you have your ace for the main thing you do, your suit which defines your defenses and also may give you some magical abilities, and then the rest of the cards are either in your hand or up your sleeve depending on what they do, which is a little bit of, it's confusing to players, but it's also very fun, so I'm hesitant to get rid of it. Stone Marrow is the other primary resource. It is a bone-like, occasionally oozing material found in Kamaka or occasionally in mundane mines where the supernatural touches. Rarer variants of this may even seem to pulse or bleed and produce more powerful effects. This can be refined into magical objects, typically by crafters of the faiths. These are our two main magical resources, right? One of which grows somewhat randomly up on the surface. Oh, I should mention that here. Its appearance seems to be random, and attempts attempts before now to create Anamoine farms have had no success, right? So both of these things are things that need to sort of be sought out and found and brought up, lending to the rarity of magical equipment. But, of course, the different nations and peoples are trying to build up and work them in together. But alright, let's see. Am I missing any other major central conceit? I did not outline the three different, like the main different heritages, and I did not outline the main faiths. I'm wondering if I need to for this specific document. I probably should. I'm going to do a very short one for each. Be right back. Alright, see you shortly, Nova. We'll do one for faiths and one for heritages. We're going to put heritages as well. We're going to have the Kino, which roughly means... Oh, I'm off screen again. Gotta scroll. I need to put some more white space at the bottom to scroll us up. Which roughly means island people are the indigenous people to Isla Marta. Many fled. Let's see, or rather than many, I'll say some were conquered and enslaved. Some fled to the mountains or caves, and those settlements lived in hiding for centuries, but have recently resurfaced with the island's independence. We have the Maria, which I forget what it means. Which roughly means daughters of the sea. I believe I was trying to go for are the people of the empire which pierced the Sea of Storms and conquered these lands. Though the Empire was driven out, many of that heritage remain, and many did side with the revolutionaries in their quest for freedom. We have the Omulu, which I believe is people of the land. I could be misremembering that one. It's been a long time since I came up with the etymology for these. Are people that the Empire enslaved or bought and brought here to the island to work its fields, now all liberated. They are free but unable to return to their homeland, right? And then we have the fourth major one, are the Varias, which simply means varied. These are people of mixed heritage and comprise the majority of Isla Marta, right? This is the Hispanic, right? Like you have a little bit of Spain in you, a little bit of African, a little bit of indigenous American, and so that those would be the Varias. Now, I'll put a note here. Other heritages are present, and players and GM who are interested in doing so should feel free to carve a niche or settlement for these heritages. I'll put in italics. For example, the Charian people, or the Charia people, are a people who were brought to Isla Marta for their mining expertise, and there is still to this day an enclave of them in Pueblo Profundo, though many Varias descended from them have spread across the island, right? Just as an example. So those are sort of our three heritages there, right? We have our indigenous people, the conquerors, and those who were enslaved and brought here, all now stuck here, right? And then, of course, the ones who were born out of this, I don't want to use the word union, but out of these events, right? Now, then for the faiths, these faiths do loosely correspond to the various people. We have the Tukshabawa, which is the faith of the Kino people, combines ancestor worship with that of a set of demigods. Many of the demigods have been lost to history due to conquest, or many of the demigods outside of the most known have been lost to history due to conquest. But there are still scattered communities with their own patron demigods. Outside of the most known, I'll put 8. Right. There we go. And we have La Iglesia Teologia, the faith of the Maria people, which places a heavy emphasis on the Holy Daughter and the saints which have worked miracles on the world, is separated from El Voz del Dios, the voice of God, who is typically leader of their faith. and must deal with that, while in this land where they are not fully accepted due to past alignment with the Maria Empire. So the church, oops, I'm getting off the bottom of the screen again, did split from the Empire during the war towards the end. Right? Oh yes, and I should mention here, this is important for people who want to play miracle workers. Magic in the Tuxebawa faith comes from crafted items and the stories they tell. A miracle worker does not need tools or clothes of Anamoine to access the magic that the magic that the patterns describe in story on them. Right? Alright. Magic in the Theologian faith comes from spoken prayer. These invocations are often passed through a saint rather than directly to their deity, with each saint having their domain, their own domains that they are responsible for, right? We have Awon Sako, or the Adrift peoples, the faith of the Omulu people, revised given their stranded nature. In this faith, some of the demigods sensed the return of the Sea of Storms and held it open to allow a few of their countless number to arrive here to protect their people, right? Magic in the Aon Sako faith comes from physical motion, at times looking like a dance, at times being more esoteric hand motions or stances. By embodying the energies of the demigods, miracle workers allow the demigods to act through them. You know what? We'll say invite the demigods to act through them. And then finally we have Fe Unificade, or the Unified Faith. This I think draws a little bit of a fun mix, right? Like in typical fantasy settings, you have different gods, and usually it's like a polytheistic setting where people have their favored god. You might be a paladin of the sun god, or a cleric of a healing god, or right? In this particular one, you have these three distinct faiths. One that focuses on saints, one that has demigod, or two that have demigods but invoke them different ways. But Fe Unificade is a syncretized faith. It is one that combines all the aspects of these three other faiths. The union of the above faiths, born out of the necessity to hide one's true beliefs while enslaved or conquered. So this is like the people of the Tuxebawa faith may not have been able to refer to their demigods by the names that they would wish to, but they could find an equivalent saint, or a roughly equivalent set of saints, in La Iglesia Teologia, and they would revere those saints as if they were the demigods, right? And though they were, technically speaking, doing the motions of worshipping the saints, they were in their mind worshipping those original demigods. But over centuries, of doing so, this has morphed into a faith all of its own, neither being wholly of any parent, right? So they've come together to be its own unique thing. Varies heavily from location to location, as the exact mix of faiths will determine the aesthetic and even the names used. Magic in Fe Unificate comes from the regalia worn. Miracle workers create clothing that resembles their associated demigods and possess a mask that draws to mind one aspect of their many potential faces. When the mask and regalia are worn, the miracle worker becomes, let's see, what's the word I'm looking for? Attunes themselves to that demigod and works with their powers, right? And works as if they have their power. Acts, perhaps. Right? Alright, there we go. Those are our four faiths, and we already touched on the magic systems. You know, this one should probably go next to the magic systems, because when you're talking about a fantasy world, fantasy stuff, or like faiths, tend to be magic systems, right? And actually that would make me want to say, but these don't really have a consistent aesthetic for how they work. Alright, that's fine. Alright, let me see. Where are we at? We've got our pitch. Let's see, I want to reference these ideals. Again. Which creations and discoveries will combine to form Isla Marta's future, and which will be cut from the island by the conflict that threatens to consume it. Right? Which ideas, beliefs. So what I want to do here is I want to hint at the existence of which ideas, creations, beliefs, and discoveries. I want to hint at, there's multiple faiths, there's multiple types of magic. I don't want to get into them all in the pitch, right? The pitch, just like we don't mention all the different types of creatures in the pitch. But I do think we want that emphasis here. Let me bold some of these. Syncretism, mixed heritage, what is, what could be, community, individualism. There we go. Alright. We're at 10:24, so I don't want to go too much longer. Let's take a very quick pass at the classes, and we're going to assign them a magic system. This is... Actually, you know what? No, it's not going to work. Most classes with magical ability could map to any faith, but the difference is in how their miracles, any faith or magic system, the difference is how their miracles slash magic look, are invoked, and where it comes from. So to put it we already sort of touched on it we touched on it, where is it, down below? Down below. So it's like, consult the, I'm just gonna close these for now. Consult the distinctions sections on faith and magic for details. Right? I think we'll do that instead. Because otherwise each of these is going to go in a very similar direction. Right? It's going to be, you could be from any of these faiths or magic systems. All you need to do is pick one and then work with the GM to figure out, what that looks like. Or if you have a specific flavor, ask the GM and they'll tell you blah, 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 blah. Right? Alright, so that part's done. Let's take a look at our player principles. What do we want our player principles for this one to be? See, do I have my pitch doc for this? I don't think I do offhand. Let me take a quick look to see if I do have it. Let me take a quick sip of water while I consult my notes. Alright, yeah, I can't find my key player questions here. So here's what I'll put. Take attention that the island is experiencing and embody it. Right? Marta has many questions to answer. Authoritarianism threatens its east, while democracy struggles west. In the west. Right? Capitalism is strong in its center and weak on its borders. Let's see. Acceptance of everyone, of all heritages. How do I phrase it? There's also fascists to the south. No, I don't think that's a good tension, right? They're just enemies of everyone, right? But like, there's authoritarianism and democracy, right? Like, with the democracy struggling, how much leadership do people need? With the freedom granted by the capitalism in its center, what benefits does that convey? In what ways are people being exploited? And how do the more communal societies struggle with the limited resources and the engines of capital churning right next door, right? Let's see. The varied faiths struggle to find their identities. Pick one of these open questions and make your character unsure about. Actually, no. Pick one of these open questions and decide, or that your character has a strong opinion about. And pick another which affects them, but they aren't sure of. Keep these in mind. Keep these in mind when making your character and their backstory, and with their actions mid-game, right? Like during the game. This will help make sure that people are all on theme and investing in what this setting has to offer, right? Like, on one hand, this is supposed to be a fantasy setting, so it should support a variety of playstyles. But if you're coming in and then deciding, you know what, I don't want to explore themes of community versus individualism, or really think about mixed heritage, or have anything to do with the idea of cultures and religions blending together, then maybe this isn't the right setting to play for that particular campaign, right? Like, this campaign is supposed to be, or this setting's about those things. So if none of the characters care about them, well, those are the things that are going to be happening to them, right? So if none of the characters care, they're either going to start to care, or just be thrown around by the winds of them. Let's see, is there anything else to say or do? Any other ideas for principles? Let's think on this for a moment, since I think this is what we'll close out on, is on these principles. Let's see. Ooh, yeah, okay, here's another one. This will lean into the heritage question, right? How does your character's heritage shape them? How do they defy it? This is a very similar question that we ask in a lot of the the communities, right? But because we want to really pay attention to this idea of syncretism, of like everything coming together, but also of like the ideas of getting past colonialism, they're probably something that most characters are affected by in one way. If they're Marian, if they are of Maria descent, how do they grapple with being the ones who conquered the island? Do they feel guilt? Or do they believe that's behind them? If it's the latter, how do they feel about when they encounter people who disagree and still hold grudges, right? If they are of Kino descent, how do they feel about having to share the island with others? How do they feel about their ancestral home still being exploited elsewhere? How do they feel about their deities who failed to protect them and their homeland for centuries, right? So there's a lot of questions about that there, right? If they are of Omu descent, how do they feel about the homeland they may have only heard, or they likely have only heard about in stories? Do they miss it, or is Isla Marta their home? And if it's the latter, how do they feel about the older members of their community who feel differently, right? And wish to return? And I think this all comes together with, if they are of various descent, in what ways do you feel a part of your respective heritages, and what aspects do you feel, gotta scroll again, are forever beyond you, right? Like, a lot of this is, we're entering the amount of time passing that a lot of people who are born or who are alive today don't know an island without the Sea of Storms, even though it was within the past century. Like, as far as history is concerned, that's relatively recent. So I think a lot of these questions would help. I don't want to use the word inspire, but like they'll help hook the characters into the setting, right? I think if you keep these two in mind, find a theme of the setting, and then find a figure out how your character's heritage is and how that shapes them, and put both of those into your character. You can take all the other aspects you want, and boom, you'll have a character who's ready to engage with the setting. All right. Ugh. Boom. Yeah, exactly. Well, we didn't even go over all the maps that were scrolling by, but honestly, I don't know if we could have, and still focused on actually making the campaign frame. 3 big booms. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, exactly. Once again, we left the GM principles unwritten. I will go and fill them out. I will fill out more inciting incident for this one as I think about what I would want it to be. I feel like I'd lean towards, right now, because it's such a flexible one, I'd lean towards customizing this. Like if I was running, I would just customize it to the characters. But it makes sense for there to be one for GMs to be able to use, right? Campaign mechanics. Oh, okay. Here you go, mechanics. One quick mechanic that I definitely wanted to do. We'll call this attuning your Isla Marta. This is something you can adjust some of the aspects of Isla Marta along different axes to determine what kinds of threats you might face. Oh wow, hi Mordio. Hello, Average Peanut Butter. Welcome. We are covering tabletop RPG campaign settings. Welcome on in. So one of the major things here that I've imagined with this setting is that if different people were to run it, or if I was to run it multiple times, you would be able to adjust the levels of there are different knobs you could turn, right? Different ones which, to Nova specifically, who has a certain compass item, might be familiar, right? Let's see, so we have how much does the island bleed, right? This determines how many Yamoin there are, how many beasts. You have how much does the island echo, right? This determines how many ghosts haunt the lands. And actually, before I keep going, I'm going to say, by adjusting down one or more of these threats, but raising others, a group can tailor the setting to very different feels, or to very different tones and vibes. For example, turning down threats aside from echoes and making them the primary monster will give the campaign a historical, cultural weight. Is this kind of like D&D? Yes, kind of like it. So I don't know how familiar you are with other settings. Specifically, what I'm doing is I am taking the idea of a campaign frame from Daggerheart, which is a recently released tabletop RPG, similar to D&D in that it is very fantasy focused. And what it does is it has a bunch of mechanics for classes, different ancestries, etc., like you'd expect from a D&D like. But what is of interest to me as someone who loves GMing, and GMs 9 times out of 10, is that they have this idea called a campaign frame, at the back of their book, a way to pitch different settings for 2 GMs and players to get you interested and excited. Instead of generic fantasy setting number 1, 2, and 3, it's like, oh, here's Age of Umbra and what you can expect in it. And so what this particular what we're doing here is we're making those campaign frames for one of my homebrew settings. This particular homebrew setting, I've only ever run. All flags are the same ratio. Boring. They all gotta fit on the slide. And this setting in particular is an early 1900s sort of get ratioed. This setting in particular is an early 1900s, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, nation states are really becoming a thing. So I used a lot of modern flag design to put together those flags. Not even a 1-1 gives Switzerland and the Vatican some recognition. Ooh, that's a good point. I did not recognize Switzerland or the Vatican. That is something to consider. Yeah. But yeah, so we have, as you're commenting on, the 7 flags. You can probably kind of see the map underneath it. Not all of the nations are clearly visible. There's one in the top right and one in the top left that are a little bit leaning off the map there. But each of these are nations in this single Caribbean island setting, based on Cuba. I am of Cuban descent. I've done a lot of research into the topic and put together this island that is essentially not quite at war, but you could make 15 attack routes from the Black Nation. Oh yeah, from Alianza in the middle. Yeah, so technically speaking, the island isn't quite at war yet, but it's very much poised to be so. The nation in the center there, which has come up a couple of times during this setting, as I think it would be the default place you start your campaign. It's centrally located. It's has the possibility for people from everywhere to be there. Is in fact the youngest nation on this island. The island has only been independent for 60 years, and those 5 city-states in the center joined together just 5 years prior to the campaign's start as a way to protect themselves from the growing nation-states on the borders there. So yeah, that one is particularly dramatically poised in that it's vulnerable to almost every other nation, right? But at the same time, it is in the center and thus strategically located, giving it a lot of political sway when it comes to trade, etc. So yeah, keyword yet, exactly. This is a setting that is, though it is free, it has not yet decided what it is going to be, and a lot of people have very different ideas about that, right? So let me see. The current flag that just popped up, Kikokyo, that one is the one that's in the top right, just hiding off on the side there. Its flag's supposed to invoke both mountains and lakes. This one with the 5 stars, the gold and black, that's the Alliance, La Alianza there in the center with its 5 city-states. One of them, you notice one star is slightly bigger than the other because that one city-state is the capital. And not only is it the capital of the nation, but the capital of the capital in that country, right? Where all the wealth has consolidated. And so each of these flags represents one of these nations, one of these ideas, with varying degrees of, like, some of these nations are more authoritarian, some of them are more communal, some are more individualistic, some are more capitalist. You have waters too. Yes, so this setting is currently a large island surrounded by a perpetual storm that reignited around when the island regained its independence. So it's not as visible here, but they're to the northern part of the map and the southeastern part of the map. there are 2 seas that are filled with hundreds, if not thousands, of little keys, small islands where, yeah, maybe there's small settlements of people on them, but generally speaking, they're not that major enough to support like a big city. They can support small pirate outposts or small dens of monsters, however, making them good for little adventure settings. Actually, right here is what I'm gonna, just a second. I will make the map a little bigger. Water would be nice. Let me put the map over the text here for a moment. Ooh, hydrate. Good call. I'm actually almost out of water. Let me finish it off. Alright, so I've made the map a little bit bigger. We're covering some of the text, but that's okay since we're talking about the map right now. So you can you can better see where there is open water to either side. I need you to get more up. I think I'm alright for now. Thank you, though. Yeah, so we got water. We got open seas to the southeast and the northwest. And the perpetual storm rages roughly at the borders of the map. I made a map of this proportions, but it would probably be more oval. The Blue Nation is the smallest by land, right? Yes, indeed. And it's mostly mountainous land. The light blue one. There's also a dark blue one that's a little bit harder to see that is completely landlocked by the pink one up there. Which also has a relatively small amount of land. Actually, looking at it, Yellow too does have a small amount of land. So barely inhabitable. The island as a whole is actually quite what's the word I'm looking for? Verdant. There are some places where that's not the case. However, the central part of the island and the southwest have lots of farmland, lots of places for producing food. Further east, the land is a little bit more corrupted, where it is more difficult to farm and produce food. Yeah, as far as habitability, definitely the biggest threats to habitability aren't so much the natural environment. If it wasn't for the supernatural threats, it would probably be a pretty lush agricultural nation with plenty of places to fish. But the seasons, as they rain, there's also seasons for the monsters. What nation would you most likely attack if you were commanding a nation? If I was commanding one, here's what I'll say. So, while at the start of this campaign, or at the way this setting is being pitched, war has not started. I have run this campaign and am running it in my non-streamed campaign. In that non-streamed campaign, Light Blue took a sucker punch towards Black in the center there, and actually has more territory both at sea and in inland there. Then when Light Blue invaded, Green also took a bite out of La Alianza there in the center, out of the with the justification of protecting the civilians due to the Alliance military not responding in time, which caused both the Alliance, the Black Nation, and the Yellow Nation up there to retaliate against Green in turn. So, generally speaking, La Alianza, the central nation there, is the one which I think is most likely to be attacked first. For whatever reason, unclear. Depends on the campaign, the events. Or it could also be the first one to attack somewhere else. There is a very high concentration of wealth and power on its northern peninsula. And if the leader of that city, the self-proclaimed president of the nation, had a particular grudge or ire to direct elsewhere, he could bring his wealth and personal military to bear. If he were to be the one launching attacks, like basically any other nation would be launching an attack at them. Like Pink up here is the one that, despite having a large landmass, much of it is non-farmable, which is always bad to have when you have a large population and not a lot of farmland, and also all the other nations dislike you. So, actually, let me zoom in even a little bit more. Zoom in a little bit more. We're covering up more of our text and even some of our flags. Yeah, so actually here, if we just pop this up to full for a second and then come back. Yeah, so like, oh, I can't ping. I wanted to ping, like, you can kind of see in the center where pink and black meet, there's this little, little divot, right? That's along a mountain range where black holds the valley, which is very lush farmland, which is where my non-stream campaign began. So if Pink were to go somewhere, they'd probably try to take that farmland. Surrounded by 4 different nations, would be a good nation to invade, saying the alliance isn't formed yet. Yep. Yep. And I don't want to call it geopolitics, right? But the politics of all these different nations, almost all of them dislike almost all of the others with some, or at most tolerate some of the others, right? Like, Yellow being the hyper-capitalist, highly individualist nation, clashes heavily with Green, which is a heavily democratic theocracy, and with Pink, which is a heavily secular communist state, right? Meanwhile, blue, light blue down here at the bottom, being a just being a fascist nation that wants to reclaim the island, right, is enemies with everyone. No one likes them. The big problem being that there is like a shaky piece, right? No one wants to be the first one, and then purple or blue could be easily surrounded by pink. Yeah, so like up at the top, the dark blue and pink have an alliance, which is why dark blue is not subsumed as of yet, but who knows how long that lasts, right? And yeah, there's like an uneasy piece leading at the beginning because everyone's wary of being the ones who throw that first punch. These borders fell into place fully about 5 years ago, where Pink finished expanding to its current border. In fact, expanded because Dark Blue was under attack, so Pink expanded as their allies and conquered the ones attacking Dark Blue. So, all these borders are recently settled. All these city-states used to be independent, but due to conflict or diplomacy have slowly been building up into these nation-states now. And so, the ideas, the potential for conflict has already been there the whole time since the independence. But, because there was still other expanding to do, those tensions haven't yet boiled over. Pink could pull an Operation Barbarossa on Dark Blue. My history fails me, or whatever reference that is fails me, and I am unfamiliar. Yeah, generally speaking, Pink is more wary of external threats, because being the nation most recently at war and the nation that has the hardest time producing food for its populace, we run into issues there. Right? All you can think of is Pirates of the Caribbean. That's Barbossa, not Barbarossa. Yeah. Oh, you know. Okay. Yeah. Actually, here. So, I guess since you got me talking about nations, so I'm gonna jot them down into the document now. Let me put this map back a little bit smaller. Put it back where it was, roughly speaking. Alright. We can make it a little bigger than that. All right, there we go. All right, since we're talking about these now, let's put the nations. It's when, for historical reasons, for naming this horrible nation, Nazi Germany invaded the USSR while under a pact. Ah, I see. I do remember that they did that. I did not remember what it was called. Yeah, they very well could, and I could see a time when they do. Right now, they're allies, and in fact, Lakamun, the Pink Nation, relies on Kokokyo, the Dark Blue, for food, but all it takes is one authoritarian leader who decides, why are we relying on another government for food? We should just take it ourselves. And that's what happens, right? Exactly that there. So let's do nations in brief. So let's see, what's the best way to do this? East to west? I guess we are talking about that corner of the world right now, so we'll start there. So we have Lakamun. This is short for something longer, which I don't have off the top of my head, but I can find it for us. Oh yeah, Nova, maybe if you could go run and grab more water, please, that would be appreciated. Thank you. While I grab this. Yep. Here we go. So, oh, and something important I should note is that all of these nations as well are either inspired by a historical period within Cuba or inspired by what I think could blossom out of a Cuba that became independent but not immediately like pseudo-occupied by the US and then... Oh wait, I'm gonna put this back up here. There we go. Like, you know, pseudo-occupied for US for a couple years and then, you know, having to deal with all the geopolitics it actually did in reality. So, the full name being La República Socialista de las Personas Común, right? Or just La Común, or the Socialist Republic of the Common People, which I'll put in a bracket as pink on. Right, and actually I'll put this at the top. Colors in brackets are colors on the map. An atheistic communist nation that has made great strides in education and in creating its own form of magic called tempering, which uses memories of the dead, or which distills memories of the dead into memories that can be shared among people of a given collective. Oh, Lurk, gotta go. Oh, okay, yeah. Thanks for talking, Average Peanut Butter. It was good to chat. And you sparked my now I have to talk about all the countries. So, obviously you're lurking, but if you're still listening along, I hope you enjoy the lecture on them. It sounds to me like you enjoy the tensions and potential warfare involved in, you know, having all these sorts of nations, which I do too, which is why I've made them this way. Hold on 1 second, gonna hydrate real quick. Water. When Nova came by to get to refill the waters, I saw potato chip and I'm like, oh, potato chip would also be good, but it's so late I should not eat potato chip. EX. But anyway, going back to what we were talking about. So they have their own form of magic where basically all citizens, most citizens can produce several forms of minor magic, and 1 or 2 greater feats associated with their collective. However, the nation struggles as much of its land is soaked or is full of Yamoin and echoes, making it difficult to feed everyone, especially given its recent expansion and the damage to the land it did. Enemies with most nations either due to being communist or being atheist. There is room here for a relationship chart or like idea for it, but let's just go through the nations first. The Kokyo, which is the dark blue, a landlocked nation, primarily of Kino, who lived under the mountains there, believing it to be a sacred place. Relatively isolationist, have a grudge against their own demigods for failing to protect them from being conquered centuries ago. The land is has a high agricultural yield and has much cultural significance. Enemies with many nations due to their negative opinion of the divine, especially enemies with Pragoyayek, who reveres the same deities a Kakokyo disdains. Alright, moving across the map, we'll go to red. Oh, the Conclave. Oh wait, it's 11. Shoot, I got worked up. Alright, we're going fast. We're gonna go fast. We have the Conclave in Exile, who are red. They are the remains, we'll put it in quotes, of the Maria Empire government that surrendered and granted the island its... Oh, we're getting off the thing again. Granted the island its independence. They were permitted to exist on that adjacent island as the government, or as the leaders that became this nation betrayed the empire in a critical moment, handing victory to the revolutionaries. So basically, they betrayed the empire and got their own little corner of it, of the freed island for their trouble. Home of the, or rather, I shouldn't say home. Home away from home for the Teologian faith. Enemies with Pragoyayek and Lakamun, right? The atheists, let's see, the fascists of another faith and the atheists. And Lakamun, and I'll put and Kokyo and count them as relatively self-sufficient as a nation. Then we go to yellow, Fortuna. Yellow. Capitalists with the highest concentration of wealth in Isla Marta, this peninsula. was untouched in the revolution. We built the fastest and most manufacturing happens here. Any nation that trades buys more from Fortuna than they sell. Right. This is our hyper-capitalists. Enemies with La Commune for being atheist. That's really their big enemies with Pragoyayek for obvious reasons, because everyone's angry at Pragoyayek. We'll go to there next. Pragoyayek or Light Blue is a primarily Kino nation that wants to reclaim the island as the Kino people populated it before being conquered. Quite fascist, and emphasize the traditions of the Texabawa faith, uniting its many manifestations under its leader families. Enemies with basically everyone. Only reason they haven't gone to war yet is their smaller size and remote location in the mountains. But they control much of the southern seas. Alright, almost there. We have Nuevos Santuarios, or the new sanctuaries, which is green. A theocratic democracy where all asterisk faiths are represented in government and given weight. A nation that aims to protect and preserve its many disparate cultures. They are mildly communist in that all necessities are freely shared and given to those of good spiritual standing. And so basically, as long as you're a relatively good example of your faith, you get whatever. So there is some markets and trade for artisanal. It's getting late. Goods by artisans for the artistic goods or luxuries. Let's see. All faiths are represented. Oh yeah, let's get to the asterisk. There are several faiths they have declared heresy. Cults such as Kikokuyo's opinion of Texabawa interpretation, which finally leaves, right, this is our last one, finally leaves La Alianza, which is black and in the center there. A loose alliance of city-states united under the presidency of Ciudad Victoria and Teofilo Alma. Despite Fortuna having the majority of the island's wealth, Alma is the single wealthiest individual on Isla Marta, and his private military rivals that of other nations on its own. Created to deter Lakamun from expanding further, it gained much of its military wealth and might by keeping funds and weapons promised to city-states now conquered by Lakamun for itself while that war was ongoing. Basically, the leader of Ciudad Victoria, Teofilo Palma, he was doing donation drives for city-states as Lakamun was expanding, being like, send everything here, we'll stage it, we'll send it out to stop Lakamun's advance, and then he actually just kept it all. And, you know, it's kind of hard to take it all back after that point. People were so afraid of the communist threat that he basically became king of the castle. God. Yep. So, even the let's see. Fortuna is La Alianza's closest ally. However, there are tensions as Fortuna wants to own and profit from much of La Alianza's land, while Palma wants to ensure that his holdings remain his. Right? So, this goes back to what prompted all this, what Average Peanut Butter was asking earlier, like, who would attack who? And really, with the exception of Red, which is mostly minding its own business, because Red feels like, and justifiably so, Red feels like if they were to launch a war of aggression unprompted, every other nation would turn around and smack them off the island, right? Because they are the remnants of the previous empire. And they're 99% right about that. But basically every other nation doesn't like La Alianza for one reason or another. They'll work with them, they'll be neutral, but Palma is a grade A, like, dictator who has become a very scary island-wide force, to the point that other nations have to respect that. But, like, grade A dictator. Yep. And so, it's like Lakamun, they could attack La Alianza because they want more farmland. Pragoyayek, because La Alianza is, of all the nations, the one most disorganized, and their whole goal is to reconquer the entire island anyway. Why not start with the easiest targets? And La Alianza has a pretty major mine not far from Pragoyayek, which would be good. You want that raw materials to, you know, supply a war effort. Nuevos Santuarios could conquer, would probably be the least likely of the land of the ones touching La Alianza to fight it, but they would go in potentially because they think that the spiritual needs, like, people are being exploited and go in for spiritual needs, right? If they think heresy is happening, they would go in to remove that. Especially if they think that La Alianza is becoming, and honestly, Nuevos Santuarios Green down there, has been eyeing La Alianza and Fortuna quite suspiciously, believing that both are starting to replace the gods with money instead, which they're not entirely wrong about, but it hasn't quite happened yet. But if they were able to view the other two nations as atheistic, Nuevos Santuarios might invade. And then, of course, Fortuna might invade if they think they can do so fast enough to preserve the resources there without giving the other nations a chance to come in and lay claim or get drawn into a lengthy conflict, right? Because Fortuna would rather not go through Palma, who has already broken deals, but they kind of have to, because the man has a lot of guns and a lot of well-paid mercenaries, right? So we got all this fun tension, and that's why if war is going to start in Isla Marta, it will be with La Alianza, whether they're being attacked or attacking others. And that interlude, I think, is where we are going to end. Wow. Yeah. Alright, that went much later than I thought, but also, I don't know, I have fun talking about it, which is why I get worked up so easily, so I feel a little guilty for keeping Nova and myself up late. But that's where we are going. I'm going to put us on to closing to stop myself from talking more about this. Ooh. Give me a second to stretch. Drink another sip of water. Alright. Very informative stream. Good work. Thank you, thank you. I hope people had as much fun listening and asking questions as I did yapping about it. For the rest of this week, to be brief, on Thursday I will be playing the Lies of P DLC. I am trying to get to the DLC on a fresh save, but there's a good chance I'll have to use my post-final boss save instead, just because I haven't been going through fast enough. I still want to play Blueprints, which I'm in the middle of. If we have to do that, it's overall fine. I hear that you'll miss some slight changes in the last few chapters of the game, but I don't know, maybe I'll catch up to my New Game Plus file separately. And then on Friday, Nova will be playing Little Goody Two Shoes again, and who knows, maybe Nova will go as long on that game as I did tonight, maybe longer. Only way to find out is to come and see. So, thank you so much everyone for visiting the Liminal Branch Library. We hope you've enjoyed your time here, and we hope to see you again soon. Goodbye, and good night.